Welcome to Praise, Prayer and Preaching with the Reverend Dr. Rick Dacey, Senior Minister, Wesley Congregational Life.
So I have a question for you. Do you want to be blessed? Somebody said right away, yes. No question about it. Matter of fact, I see a number of people look very open to being blessed. What about right tonight? Do you want to be blessed tonight? Are you ready? Are you prepared to be blessed? It's a serious question. And I think it's an immediate and an urgent one because I believe that not only does God want you to be blessed, God is prepared to bless you tonight. This very night. God is prepared, fully desires and fully intends to bless you and me, every single one of us here tonight. But do you want to be blessed? The question is not, do you think that God will bless you? It's, do you want to be blessed? Are you prepared to be blessed? All right, get on with it. Now, I ask you that question multiple times because I'm not sure you do. Hang on. Let's just make sure that we're all on the same page with what God means by blessing. Before we answer yes, let's make sure we know what we're answering yes to. We heard tonight the opening of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount covers a lot of ground in terms of what it means for us to live as Jesus' disciples. And it all begins in Matthew 5 with the blessing of God. And most of us are probably familiar with these blessings that James read for us tonight. You probably heard these beatitude blessings. On their own, it's easy to gloss over the beatitude blessings. And it might even be easy to hear them kind of as pleasing, patronizing, pious platitudes. You know, as a sentimental Facebook post, something that would fit well on your news feed with a soft filtered picture of a kitten sitting in a bed of flowers looking at a sunset. You know, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Yeah, God bless them. Like and share if you agree. But in fact, the blessings that we see in Matthew 5, these are not on their own. They are the introduction of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. They frame Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which is about as far from a soft, warm, fuzzy sermon as you're going to get. The Sermon on the Mount, with all its blessings, is the ultimate tough love sermon. Jesus is comprehensively deconstructing the self-righteous religiosity of the Pharisees. Jesus is about to take the teachers of the law to school. You have a sense that you can force God's hand by your good works, do you? You think that your religious knowledge will force God to count you in and to count others out, do you? All right. You have lust in your heart? If you do, you've already committed adultery, says Jesus. You're angry with a brother or sister. You're in the same boat as a murderer. You cannot serve both God and money. And the standard by which you judge others is a standard by which God will judge you. If you don't forgive others their sins, the Father won't forgive yours. Love your enemies. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. All of that and more is in Jesus' one sermon. I mean, it's a really, really tough sermon. Jesus systematically dismantles any claim that any of us might have to a self-righteous, independent religion. And he drives all of us to our absolute need for the grace of God. That is the central theme of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount drives us all to our shared need for the grace of God. The week before last, I had the privilege of witnessing God's grace-filled blessing in action through Wesley Urban Mission. These young people from our Wesley congregations and from other churches around Sydney, they came together and they dedicated a week of their school holidays coming alongside people with disabilities, disadvantaged children and families, isolated seniors, and people facing homelessness. Well, we're going to hear more about their experience down the track, but tonight I just want to share a tiny little glimpse of their experience with you. On day 4 of their mission trip, the kids were in Surrey Hills, putting on a barbecue for people experiencing homelessness. These are people who are served by Wesley's Edward Eager Lodge. Now, we didn't want the kids to just be doling out charity. We didn't want them to be doling out charity to people who came to the barbecue. All the kids agreed that they wouldn't want to be the object of somebody else's charity. They wouldn't want to be somebody else's object of their good deed for the day. And so they were determined not to be that way towards those who came to the barbecue. None of them wanted to be pitied, and so they weren't offering pity. They were offering friendship. No, we wanted them to see people as people. We wanted to welcome them as honored guests. And that's what they did. That's what the kids did. It was great to see. They shared a meal with them, and there were just wonderful conversations all over the room. As they finished eating, though, a remarkable thing happened as they kept talking. As they kept talking, you could see these groups of teenagers on their school holidays sitting with people experiencing homelessness, and you could see the kids leaning in and listening to the stories. You could see, in one group, particularly, I could see the whole group of kids, and it was just a random collection of kids, not a group of friends, not a group of schoolmates, not a group from a youth group, just a random collection of kids, and they were all sitting, listening with tears welling up in their eyes. And I saw all around the room these powerful conversations happening. And there was one of them, this one that we see here, praying with their guest. They were praying with their guest, Jay, as they listened to his story. They just spontaneously prayed with him. No adults prompted them. Nobody suggested it. The Spirit led them together into prayer. It was a powerful moment. In our worship time back at our base camp that night, this group of kids who didn't know each other before the trip, they all came up to the front to share, and they came to share what they heard of Jay's story. It had been a hard road that led Jay to homelessness, but what really struck these kids was not the power of his struggle, but the power of his faith. And the tears that they had in their eyes, they weren't tears of pity. They were tears of inspiration as they listened to what God was doing in his life. They talked about their new friend Jay with a sense of genuine admiration. For them, Jay wasn't the less fortunate. Jay was blessed. It was an extraordinary testimony from these young people. And you could tell that they felt blessed to have just spent an hour with him. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And then Jesus says this. Now listen to this. This is how Jesus frames the whole Sermon on the Mount. And listen to this. He says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. How often do you think of blessing being bound up with persecution? When you think of blessing, do you automatically think of persecution? We might want to ponder that at arm's length. But Jesus won't let us keep it at arm's length. He takes it from the abstract to the direct and personal, and he says, blessed are you. Blessed are you when people insult you or revile you. Blessed are you. And he says it to anyone who would follow him, to me, to you, to you. Blessed are you when people insult you or revile you. Is that your idea of blessing? To be insulted and reviled? Blessed are you when people persecute you falsely and say all kinds of evil things about you. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you, says Jesus. Now, about that question we started the sermon with. You remember that now? Do you want to be blessed? Are you prepared to be blessed tonight? Yeah, it's a little tougher question as we get into the Word. Yeah, I'm wondering how many of us would put our hand up and say, I'd like to receive that blessing that goes with being insulted and persecuted and reviled, people falsely saying all kinds of evil about me. Bring on that blessing. But Jesus is talking about real hardship here. Real hardship and suffering, deep pain and loss. And he calls those who experience persecution blessed. What kind of blessing is that? What kind of blessing is it to experience persecution? Would we put a sign like that out in front, on the front door? Come be persecuted with us. Experience the blessing of persecution. Would we put that on the mission website? I don't think so. I don't know how many people we'd draw in with that kind of message. And yet Jesus is very clear about it. Blessed are you when people insult you and revile you and persecute you. We see, if it's hard for us to see that, if it's hard for us to imagine being ready for that kind of blessing, it might be helpful for us to have a deeper understanding of God's blessing. We see it right from the beginning, that blessing of God that flows from a covenantal relationship with God, from that promise relationship that flows from God to us. In Genesis 12, Abram, later called Abraham, he receives God's blessing. Now why does God bless Abram? You know what Abram's done to deserve the blessing, don't you? Nothing. He's just Abram, just a regular guy, just like you, just like me. He's done nothing to deserve the blessing. That's the first thing we discover about blessing through Abram. It's not about us. The blessing of God isn't about what we do. It isn't about how good we are. It's about how good God is. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing, says the word in Genesis. Did you hear that? So that. God doesn't bless Abram for Abram's personal gain. God blesses Abram so that he will be a blessing for others. A blessing isn't just like an agreeable thing that happens to us. Sometimes I think we hear blessed or blessed as a churchy synonym for lucky. Oh, I'm so blessed that I found that parking spot. Oh, I'm so blessed I got in before it started raining. That's not blessed. That's luck. Whatever luck is, it's not blessing. Luck is, for whatever it may be, luck is yours to keep. You're lucky, good for you. Lucky you. It's yours to keep. Blessing is entirely different. Blessing, if it is a blessing, has to be shared. Blessing is never mine to keep. Blessing needs to be shared. That's what blessing is about. Blessing in the Bible isn't about things working out the way that I want them to. Blessing is about God working things out in and through us. God doesn't just toss out blessings arbitrarily just for something to do. No, God has a purpose bound up in every blessing. And every blessing is bound up with the purposes of God. And if we want to know what God's purpose is in blessing, look for the so that. God's blessings always have a so that. There's always a purpose in the blessing. We see the same so that reflected that we see in Abram's story. When he says, I will bless you so that you will be a blessing, we see the same thing reflected in the New Testament. In 2 Corinthians 1, the Apostle Paul writes, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles." Why? So that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. There's a purpose, God's purpose in the blessing. God blesses us with comfort in our troubles. Why? So that we can comfort those in trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. God doesn't bestow terminal blessings. They don't end with me. There's always a so that in the blessing. Again, Paul says in 2 Corinthians 9, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." God doesn't bless us for our own security and our own contentment. God doesn't bless us for our own convenience or pleasure. God blesses us so that we will be a blessing. We are blessed to be a blessing. Receiving God's blessing means embracing the purpose of that blessing. Receiving God's blessing means living into the purpose, the meaning of that blessing. And receiving God's blessing means releasing control and stepping forward in faith. We see it in Jesus' mother Mary. She received God's blessing. She didn't earn or deserve that blessing. God chose her, and God blessed her. And she was open to receive it. That was her part. She was open to receive the blessing. She was prepared to receive the blessing. We hear her confess in Luke that from now on, all generations will call me what? Blessed. Look at what that blessing meant for Mary. She had to flee as a refugee with her family. To save her child from murder, she had to flee to a foreign country where they didn't know the language, where they weren't much welcome, where they were boat people. To save her son, they had to live as asylum seekers, as refugees. That's part of the blessing. Consider her blessing as she had to witness her son insulted and reviled and tortured and executed. What kind of blessing is that? All generations will call me blessed. Jesus says, "Blessed are you when people revile you, when you are persecuted because of me." You know, we Christians, we don't know religious persecution in Sydney, I'm sorry. Or where I'm from in America, we do not know religious persecution. I hear Australian and American Christians talk as if they are part of a persecuted religion. Because of the changes going on in society, because the church no longer holds its central place in Western society that it once did. But look, we don't know anything about persecution. There are people in this mission who have lived in parts of the world who know what it is to be persecuted for your faith. There are people in our mission family who do understand persecution. And some of you, I expect, know what it means to have friends and families turn away from you, cut you off, falsely say all kinds of evil about you. You understand persecution. But let's be clear, the loss of the church's privileged place in Western society is not persecution. And the fact that Starbucks took Merry Christmas off their coffee cups last year is not persecution. What does that mean for us here in Australia, where we are free to worship as we choose, where we are blessed with our freedom, where the biggest threat to the Christian church is not antipathy, but apathy? What does it mean for us? The blessing of God doesn't come from us developing a persecution complex, trying to make ourselves out to be aggrieved victims. Oh, the church is under fire. No. Jesus doesn't call us to seek out persecution. Jesus calls us to seek out the persecuted, to come alongside those who are suffering, to stand with those who are persecuted. He calls us to come alongside the reviled in the world as he did. You know, I think of the people who are reviled and persecuted around me. Who are the reviled people around you? Do you see them? I think of the kid who sits alone in the schoolyard at lunch. No one will connect with him. No one wants to know him because they don't want to get lumped in with him. I think of the women in this city who are working in the brothels tonight. Many of them without the language skills, without the cultural knowledge to know how to get out. Many of them trapped. Many of them enslaved. Who will stand with them? Who will risk being lumped in with them? Who are the people around you who are reviled? Are we prepared to be lumped in with them? Are we willing to be blessedly reviled together with them? Jesus was willing. He came alongside the lepers. He came alongside the outcasts, the prostitutes, the foreigners, the sinners, the tax collectors, and he was reviled for it. He came alongside the bruised and the broken, and he said, "Blessed are you when you are reviled and persecuted." Not when you play the victim because of your faith, but when your faith brings you to places where you will risk being tarred with the rest of them, when you will risk being lumped in and reviled and persecuted yourself. Blessed are you when you take your place among them. Do you recall what the crowd said as Jesus rode into Jerusalem in that last week of his life? Do you remember what the crowd said? We recall it when we come to the Lord's table. Every time we come to the Lord's table, we remember the crowds shouted out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." The crowds didn't have any idea what blessed meant or where Jesus was headed. But Jesus did. He knew exactly where he was going. He knew the meaning of the words, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." He knew that he wasn't riding in to take his place among the rulers and the elites. He knew that he wasn't riding in to take his place among the high flyers, the respected and the respectable. He knew that he was riding into Jerusalem to take his place among the reviled and the persecuted, riding in to take his place among the transgressors and to be numbered among them, to be numbered with us out of love. And only by way of the cross and the tomb would he ultimately take his place at the right hand of God. In Jesus, we see blessing in all its fullness, laying down his life so that we might receive salvation through him. In Jesus, we see blessing in all its fullness, and he calls us to that same path, to walk that same path, and to share in that same blessing so that lives can be changed by grace. He calls us to walk that same path and to share that same blessing so that all creation may be reconciled to God through Christ. My sisters and brothers, God is prepared to bless you tonight. God is ready and intends and desires to bless you and me, all of us, this very night. Are we prepared to be blessed?